Thank you, Haven. I'm so excited to be here with you this evening. As Haven said, my name is Jennifer Wise, and I am the Instructional Services Specialist in Lexington 2. And so what that means is I work with some of our federal programs for professional development and our English language learners, in addition to supporting our teachers from our instruction division. I have a heart for education and the students and teachers that we're able to serve each day. So I'm delighted to be here with you this evening and share a little bit about my passion, which is education. So I'm going to share my screen with you and kind of talk you through my story. I think the best way for me to tell you about my love of teaching is to kind of tell you a little bit about myself. And so with that comes, as you'll see in this first slide, my husband, Michael. There we go. And here's our family. And so I like to start here because, as I mentioned, to know who I am as a teacher, it's important to know who I am. And so when Michael and I got married about 6.5 years ago, just straight from the beginning, I was able to share my heart with him about education and just a love for being able to serve our students. And so for the many, many reasons that I love him, one of the greatest leading that is his desire to pour out his heart to others as well. And so when I shared with him, I think we need to live in the neighborhood where a lot of our students do, so that they know that we're just right down the road or across the street. They can come at any time. And so while I get that it's not common that somebody puts a picture of their house in a presentation, it's very much a part of who we are as a family, and who we want to be, both for students in the classroom and then our community as well. And so then we have our two girls, Finley on the top. I'm reading to her. That was actually when she was getting ready for an event. I was reading her some etiquette. She was going to be making her first debut. And then at the bottom, we've got our Frances McLean, which we call a Mackie. So they are very spirited little mini dachshunds. I will tell people I'm a dachshund tamer. They weigh in for a grand total of 13 pounds combined, but they are probably the rulers of this house. With that, kind of going back to our passion as a family for being able to serve students. I talked with Michael kind of early on, and he had the opportunity at the time to have to work a 4-day week and have Fridays off. And I was like, I definitely think that we need to do this. And so I was kind of talking about like all the great reasons for why you don't want to have a Friday off. And he works for one of the state agencies in South Carolina. And so kind of pitched this idea to him. And admittedly, I probably wasn't totally forthright, because I was thinking, you're such a great asset. He's really strong in math too. And I was like, I can't tell you how excited I am to have you in my class every Friday talking with my students as well. And so he became a part of our classroom. And so it was really, really neat to see the relationship that not only within the neighborhood, when some of our students would stop by just to say hey, but in the classroom too. Like, he was Michael, and so cool to see on a Saturday morning when we're headed to a math competition, and I've got kids meeting us at school at 5:45 to take off and go solve math problems. They're getting on the bus and they're like, Michael, what's up? And so I love that relationship that we were able to build together. And so the specific picture that I have highlighted here is from Halloween, our first year in the neighborhood. And so we had some friends coming over that night, and prior to that point had just been really honest about our hearts with my students, that if you ever need anything, we're right here, and want to be able to serve and help however we can. And so that first year we had all these people coming through, and trick-or-treating is a big deal for a lot of students and kids as it is, but it's huge in our neighborhood. And so that first year we had 186 children come by our house. And so at first they were kind of like hesitant, figuring out, because we were new to the neighborhood, and the first one came up, knocked on the door, and he got it, and he went to the end of the drive, or the end of the porch, and held his hand in the air and said, "They've got goodie bags," and on came the children. Like I said, 186. But towards the end of the night, I opened the door, and it's one of my students, and it's actually the second time I'd seen her, and except this time she's there with a little girl, and I think, oh, so sweet. She came by with her friends earlier, and now she is back bringing a little, about a 4-year-old trick-or-treating. This just melts my heart. And so I give the little girl her candy, and I look at my student, and like just with a big smile on my face, and the little girl trots down the stairs, and my student stays at the door. And so I look and I say, "Chasey, are y'all together?" And she's like, "Oh, I have no idea who that is." And so for a moment I panic, because I'm like, well, who does the 4-year-old belong to? And then I see the mom at the end of the driveway waving. But now my attention's back on Chasey. And so I say, "Hey, is everything okay?" And she goes, "Well, yeah," which immediately I knew meant maybe not so much. And so Chasey and I start talking, and she said, "Well, you always tell us that you're here for us, and that if we need somewhere to go, we can come here." And so I had some friends who were going to do something that I knew I wasn't supposed to do, and you always say that it's okay to come here. And so she starts to speak more quickly, and she said, "So I just told them that I needed to go, I needed to circle back here and ask you something, and can I stay here until my parents can come pick me up?" And I was like, "Absolutely." She goes, "I'll sit on the front porch." And I said, "No, you'll come inside." And so it was just like this great moment. And so as we talked later that night, I'm just beaming as we're kind of like putting away some of the stuff. We had some friends over, and so we're cleaning dishes and putting them away. And I'm talking about like just what a great night it's been. And so my sweet husband goes, "Because it was our first Halloween together. We love dinosaurs, so like we had dressed up as this crew from Jurassic Park, and Finley, the top picture of the dog, she was the velociraptor who had attacked us." And so he's thinking so sweetly like, "Oh, because we had our first Halloween." And I'm like, "Yeah, but," he goes, "but it was Chasey." And I said, "Yeah, we always say that you can come here. If you need us, we're here for you." And tonight we saw it lived out. And so I was just so thankful that that she knew when we say like, I'm definitely here for you during the day, but I want to be able, we want to be able to serve and help however we can. That we saw it lived out that night, and I got this passion for being able to build this community both in and out of the classroom from my mom. My mom, without question, is the consummate educator. I have a ring that I like to wear. Admittedly, I snagged it from her jewelry box, and it has she, my brothers, and my birthstones, and all three of us are teachers or work in education in the state. And so it just really means something powerful to me when I get to wear it, because my mom's actually in her 46th year teaching this year, and I think that that's something just truly remarkable. And so I look at the example that that she leads and the excitement that she still has when she'll call me and say, "Hey, have you heard about this?" Or "There's going to be a webinar about that," or "I found this resource." And she's still so excited, like she's a first-year teacher, every single day with that excitement and love and joy. And so being able to learn from her, and now as a fellow educator grow with her, is something truly remarkable. And so she's taught me so much about education, and my brother has as well. So I do want to give him that shout out. But man, I've learned so much from my mom. And so growing up, I saw who she was in the classroom, but I saw who she was outside of it. And it wasn't uncommon for one of her students to swing by our house and have a question, or just want to talk, or have a meal with us. And so it was very much this idea that your students really are your family. And I think this is really captured in one of the Thanksgivings I had. I was already living in Columbia, and so I was heading home for Thanksgiving, and I get there, and there's this really remarkable woman, Carlotta, who's having Thanksgiving dinner with us. And I learned that she's the new principal at my former elementary school. And so the night comes to a close, and we had just a great family meal, and we're kind of cleaning up after. And I say to Mom, and I'm like, "Mom, Carlotta is fantastic. Like, I get that she's the new principal there, but she's really great. How did y'all get to know each other?" And she just looks at me and she's like, "Did you not know Carlotta was on the first basketball team I ever coached. Carlotta has always been a part of our family. And so it was so natural that when she had moved back to our hometown, she was going to have Thanksgiving with us. And I just love that that's what she lives out every day. And that's her passion and that's her heart as a teacher. And I wanted to be that same thing and that same educator for my students. And so when I decided I wanted to be a teacher in 11th grade, sitting in my math class, looking at my teacher and realizing she gets to talk about math every day and help other people love it as well, I knew I was going to have the greatest job in the world. And so I applied to the University of South Carolina and was accepted. I was part of the Teaching Fellows program, which if you are a high school student, a junior graduating early, or a senior this year who's listening with us tonight, or you are an adult who knows a junior or a senior in South Carolina, please share about this program. Applications open October 1st. They close December 1st. So this is an extraordinary program that taught me so much as I was in college and preparing to be a teacher. So I went to UofSC and I majored in math and stayed for a 5th year to get my master's in education. And throughout that time and teaching fellows, we have the opportunity to volunteer in the community. And so I partnered with and spent a lot of time at Epworth Children's Home and just found my place. When I first came to Columbia, I had the intention of moving back to Gaffney, my hometown. And I was going to be a teacher at Gaffney High School because that's where I had decided I was going to be a teacher. And then, as life often does, it kind of changes things. And so I was volunteering a lot at Epworth and working with their students. And I knew this is where I'm supposed to be. Like, this is home. And so I decided that I was going to stay here and let my family know this is home now. Like, I'll always be from Gaffney, but this is where I'm supposed to be. I just knew it. And I wanted to work with those students that I was being able to serve at Epworth. At the time, they had a school on campus, the Barnes Learning Center. And so while I would say sadly that that school is not still there and operating, what I was so blessed to be able to do was to work at Hand Middle School, where those students started going to school. And so my first job was at Hand, and you'll see me there with my principal, Miss Vickers, who has just taught me so much about who I am. So coming in as Miss Guest, becoming Mrs. Wise, and I'll tell y'all that we actually got engaged during the school day, and I looped with my kids for 2 years. I had them for 7th and 8th grade, and so we got engaged during my planning. They got me out of the building, and I was like, no, I have a class coming, and they're like, it's okay. And I said, I've got to teach the children, and they're like, trust us, it's okay. And so we come back in, and clearly I'm excited because I've just gotten engaged, and I'm talking to my students. I was with my 7th graders. They were going to be with me the next year. They always knew that my kids knew that they would have me for 2 years. And Michael had gone in the back of the room, and he had been in the classroom helping and volunteering some. But I was very secretive. I never let them know he was my boyfriend. He was just this like assistant that we had. And so I tell him, and I'm like, y'all, I've got some news for you. And I sit down at the front on my bench or my stool, and I say, Miss Guest isn't going to be your teacher next year. But Mrs. Wise is. Silence. Nothing. And then they look and they turn to him, and they missed the Mrs. part. All they heard was, I think they heard Mr. And they look at Michael and they just give him like the stare and silence. And I was like, wow, this is uncomfortable. So I start talking about quadratics, because what else do you do in a situation like that? And then it takes like a couple minutes more, and one of my students goes, wait, are you two engaged? And I said, yes. And then they all got excited, which was what I was hoping would happen in the first place. But they later told me, and they were like, we thought you were telling us you were leaving us and he was going to be our teacher. Now, they like him just fine. It was just, I guess that made my heart swell a little bit that they wanted me to stay. And so I did. And we had such a great time. Some of my best memories that I've ever had were at Hand, because I had a blast getting to hang out with kiddos like you see here. Whether we were writing, doing like our history of mathematics, and we're writing songs about famous mathematicians, or having edible car contests, going to math competitions. I mean, it's a pretty incredible thing to get to do what you love and share it with others every day. Y'all, there is nothing more rewarding. And I think sometimes I worry sometimes that it sounds cliche because when you hear it, but do know when you hear a teacher say that there is nothing more rewarding than what we do, it's true and it's heartfelt. It is just incredible to be able to share your passion with some of the coolest people that you will ever meet. And so I absolutely loved from getting to talk about math. I also coached track, so they made me a little caricature, which you see at the bottom. And so I coached our math team and just had a lot of fun every day with these guys and girls. And during that time, I was privileged or blessed to be named our state teacher of the year. And so while that did take me out of the classroom, I still got to be entitled a teacher at hand. So before I would start my journeys each day, I'd go back, or I'd start at the school. I'd hold my math team meetings before school, get to head around the state to either get to talk to classes, see other teachers doing really cool things, learning from them, because I'll tell you, I learned more than I feel I was probably able to share that year about the cool things that were going on, and share incredible stories about education in South Carolina, and then head back to school to meet at the end of the day so we could have track practice. And I really like math, so I kept the stats for our basketball team. So just really cool things that I just couldn't get enough of. And then the year that followed, I had the opportunity to go to DC and serve as a teacher on Capitol Hill in a fellowship role. And so some of the congressmen and women and senators as well actually will bring in teachers to talk with them and about education policy, some of which will, and my boss was an example, will let you manage the education portfolio because they know that who knows education better than our teachers. And so it was really remarkable to get to be there and talk about education. And I'll tell you, there was so much respect for what we do. And many times I would have the staffer from another office like call and say, hey, Jennifer, this is what we're thinking about, but you're a teacher. What do you think about this? And so it was great to be able to share. And I'm always careful to say, I can only speak for myself and the teachers that I've had an opportunity to talk, to speak with. I can't speak for everyone. But here's my story, and here's my love, and here's my passion, and what I want to be able to share with you. But then also learn, because there's so much perspective from being able to both work within a school, at the state, and the federal level, and then now being back in a district and getting to serve teachers each day. But I'll tell you, I've never been able to let go of that classroom side. So even when I was working in Washington, I came home 3 weekends a month. So I mentioned my husband works here in he works for the Department of Insurance here in South Carolina. And so he needed to be here during the week and I needed to be in DC. So we would kind of bounce back and forth, but I ended up coming down a little bit more because I just had to see my students. And so on Saturday mornings and Sunday afternoons before I flew back out, I would meet students at Panera, and we talk about math and what was going on and just have some good time to work together. So when I came back to South Carolina and joined the Lexington 2 team, I found myself immediately knowing I've got to be in the classroom. And I even shared with my boss, I'm like, I'm going to get all my stuff done in the office, but where my heart is and where my passion is and where I can do the most is in the classroom. And so for my educators who are on with us tonight, I know I shouldn't have done this, but my heart was in the right place. So it's the first week of school and I've been like helping and doing all these different things, but I hadn't been in a classroom yet. And I was really missing it. Out of 2 years where I hadn't been with students in the classroom on the first day of school, it's like, I just can't take it anymore. I've got to be in a class. And so it was Friday. It wasn't the first day of school, but it was Friday at 3 o'clock and I was in a building and I'm like, I've just got to go see students. And so I walk in my suit into a classroom on a Friday afternoon, the first week of school at 3 o'clock, and the teacher's eyes are like, boing! And she's actually a graduate of UofSC as well, a good friend. And she looks at me in somewhat a panic, thinking I'm coming in for an observation. I was like, no. I just miss the students. I just need to be, I need to be here. I want to be where the learning is because it's a good thing that I always want to be a part of. And so, and a lot of that's what I get to do each day, getting to pop into classrooms, see how I can support, and then still taking opportunities to be able to co-teach with our teachers as well. And so that's very much been life for my first 12 years in education. And then, as y'all know, we've had some changes over these last few months, and COVID has really changed a lot of how we do, but it certainly, or how we do what we do, but it certainly hasn't changed our desire, our drive, and our passion to do what we do. So we've gotten creative. And I'll tell you, when I was going around as State Teacher of the Year, and then even in my time in DC, sometimes I would share about some of the programs we have in South Carolina, like Teacher Cadet, which, by the way, if you did not know, Teacher Cadet and Teaching Fellows, which I mentioned earlier, are part of our programs with SARA, the Center for Educator Recruitment, Retention, and Advancement. And Teacher Cadet actually started in South Carolina, and now over 40 other states buy our curriculum to use with their students each year, and even it's used in other countries as well. And so it's pretty remarkable that that started here. And so I would share some of these things about the good work that's happening. And one day I was sharing about one of our programs, and somebody looked and said, "And what state are you from?" And I said, "South Carolina." And they're like, "South Carolina's doing that?" And I was like, "Yes, that's happening in South Carolina." And so I love being able to be a cheerleader for all the good that's happening. And so one thing I do want to highlight, and while it was such a quick turn when we needed to close our schools in the spring, South Carolina was already preparing for e-learning. We were in our second year as a state in pilot programs for e-learning. And so the first year, if I'm not mistaken, there had been 5 districts, and then we upped to 15 that next. And so, and I was in one of the districts that was a pilot district for e-learning. So like we kind of already had the ground rule, or the ground set for what does this look like. We're not going to have all the answers yet, but we're at least already thinking in this direction. And so I think that that's really remarkable to know, like how we were already preparing to be able to serve our students and families. And as we continue to, and it does look different in different places, whether we've got in-person or hybrid or virtual, we're working to serve the needs of our families. And so with that and the new perspective on what education looks like day to day. So I've got a lot of virtual meetings. I was in a school today. My district, we are hybrid, and so I was getting to meet with some teachers today. Wednesday, we have a Monday, Thursday track A, and then a Tuesday, Friday track B. And so Wednesday is our day where everyone's virtual, but our staff are all on campus. And so I was getting to work with some teachers today, and it was really cool to be able to meet with them and talk with them about how it's going. And they're like, you know, the really cool thing about this is everything I've learned about how to be a better teacher and present material, and they're like, you know, hybrid, in-person, fully virtual, like these are things that are going to make me a better teacher when we do finally get to come back together in person. And so, and I think that really just serves as a testament to our educators that we talk about being lifelong learners and continuing to grow and hone our craft, and we're seeing it played out right now. And I love getting to be a part of it. And also having a new perspective. So we welcomed our little guy, Walter James, about 14 months ago. And man, like I thought I cared a lot about education. And then Walt was born. And so just learning so many remarkable things. And sometimes when I would tell people that I had majored in math and gotten my master's in education, and I see that there's an environmental studies major. I can't wait to get a little bit more into that question in just a moment. They would be like, woo, because I would tell them how much I loved math, y'all. If you have not talked to an early childhood educator, they are brilliant. Trying to teach a child to say their first words, it blows my mind, like what goes into it. I'm getting them to drink a sippy cup. I finally had to like pull out like my math like teacher hat and bag of tricks, and I'm like, this is going to be like a math manipulative. Let's touch the sippy cup. Let's get familiar with the sippy cup. Now let me like and all these different things. And so it's interesting, like all the different like aspects of teaching that I now see myself doing at home. But it's really, really cool getting to see and like getting to talk to his teachers from his preschool, like all that goes into it. And so I'll tell y'all, it really has been so remarkable to get to share and learn and grow with him and see how what I'm learning at home with him is then impacting what I'm able to share with my teachers at school, and be able to say, yeah, I absolutely get this, and just like deepening that understanding. And what I really want to point out to y'all is you'll see the picture on the bottom right. And that is, I'm a Holden Walt at a Carolina game. I was actually with Haven at that game. And then the lady with me, her name is Alex, and that's her little boy Holland. And so they're very special to us. Alex actually she went to the University of South Carolina as well. She actually works for USC now, but she was a middle school math teacher with me. And so when she started her first year at Hand, we were partnered together, and I was her mentor teacher. And so we got to be friends quickly. I was dating Michael at the time, and he had this great roommate named Mike. And well, I'm a meddler. And so I was like, I think I see a connection that could be formed here. And so, like I said, I'm a meddler, and got them together to go to the South Carolina State Fair. And at the end of the night, they were sharing a fried Twinkie. And you know, in the South, when you share something fried, it's love. So long story short, they ended up getting married. And so we love being able to have that connection from school. We got to teach together. We got to have that mentor-mentee relationship. We share the love of USC. And then when we texted them on Christmas Day to say that we were expecting our first, they texted us right back and said, we are too. And so then Walt and Holland were each born a day apart. We actually texted to say, we're headed to the hospital. And they texted back and said, not to one-up you, but we just had ours. So just a cool relationship. And so I tell you that because a lot of times, like, it's easy to think about like education, like being within the building. And I started by talking to y'all about the community that we build with our students, but we do it with our fellow educators as well. As a child, sometimes it's novel to see your teacher out of the building. And we notice that look when we get it, when we're walking down the aisle of Target, and they're like, you go to Target too? And we're like, yes, I do. And so these relationships that are so special and so sweet that you form with your students, but that you form with your colleagues as well, is really remarkable. And so all of this and my passion and heart that I'm sharing with you tonight, I'd love to talk with you more about this. And so I'm looking forward to getting ready to open it up to additional questions. But I want to give you a quote that I think really captures what we do. And it's from Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And he said, we can't always prepare the future for our youth, but we can prepare our youth for the future. And if that sounds like a dream and a goal and a passion of yours, I would absolutely welcome you to come along with me on the journey of being a teacher. And so to learn more, I talked about Teaching Fellows. USC has so many other programs as well, including Carolina TIP. It's a bridge support for graduates of the College of Ed as they go into their first year teaching. So you get that additional support on top of what the state and your schools and districts are able to do. We've got Carolina CAP, which is for our individuals who are interested in maybe changing careers. And you've been at home being an unexpected homeschooler, and you're like, hey, you know what? This is pretty great. I want to do this more. We welcome you with that program. And then we also have Tech to Teach, where there's opportunities for individuals who are in technical schools but interested in pursuing a career in education. So more information is available about each of those programs at the College of Education, in addition to some of the programs that are available to students. And so with that, I'd love to, I thank you for giving me an opportunity to kind of share about my passion and heart for being a teacher. And I'd love to chat with you about some of your questions. So please feel free to post those into the chat, and I'm going to start reading those now. So an environmental studies major about becoming a teacher. Yes, absolutely. The 5th year program is phenomenal. And it is, yes, it's absolutely what I did with my program was there were 3 classes that I had taken, so it was a cognate, but I'm trying to think. Sorry, I'm kind of stuttering to understand. What I would definitely recommend reaching out, because there's not a tremendous amount that you need to have had in terms of education courses before you go in. And some of those could definitely be added into your program as well. So it's not something that you have to have been planning for all along. I I said I took 3. I might have actually only taken 2 during undergrad because my minor was actually political science. So while I knew I wanted to be a teacher, I love learning. And so I was trying to soak up everything I can. So absolutely, I would definitely reach out to College of Ed, just so you know, and it might be something that could be added into your spring schedule, but they'll be able to let you know what else is needed for that. But absolutely, you don't have to have known that that 5th year was the plan all along. You can still move into that. All right, so have I always taught math? I did always teach math. In education, that's actually a great question. So we have certification fields. And so with that, you do have to teach within your certification. So I did major in mathematics. And so with that, I was originally, so I took certification so that I could teach high school math, and that was my intention. I think I might have mentioned earlier that I was planning to go back to Gaffney High School and teach math, and then I fell in love with the middle school. I think that 11 to 14-year-olds are pretty fantastic. I think all students are, but I really have a heart for that age group, and so I started teaching the middle school, and I added on middle level certification as well. So there's a series of tests. It's called the Praxis, and so with that, there's one so we've got Praxis Core, which is something for elementary teachers that they work through. And then for your middle level, there are middle level. So I took the middle, I did not actually, I take it back. I did not need to take middle level math Praxis because I had taken secondary math. And so they grandfather you in for that. But if you were looking at middle or secondary, you take the Praxis that associates with your content area. But that's a fantastic question to ask. And in terms of did I consider teaching others? I knew that I had a heart for math, but if you are considering multiple contents, a lot of times you're going to see that in elementary grades and then in middle school as well. So as part of middle school programs, you will pick 2 areas of concentration. And so while a lot of people will do English and social studies, and then math or science, you'll definitely have people who do English and math. So you kind of do your combination of desires that go along with that. And then elementary, so different elementary schools actually, while it is your elementary certification, and so when I say elementary, we know elementary schools are going to be 4K or 5K to 5th grade, but an elementary certification is going to be 3rd through 6th grade, and then an early childhood education is going to be that pre-K up to 2nd. So, and those are going to be your teachers who are generally teaching all content areas, but you will have some elementary schools that actually choose to have their teachers departmentalized, and so maybe that 4th grade teacher is teaching math and science, and his or her partner is teaching English and social studies. So it kind of depends on your grade band, but then also the praxis that you've taken, but that's an excellent question. There is continuing education for teachers. Fantastic. And so with that, and that's part of what I do in terms of professional development. So every 5 years, we are required to renew our certification. And that can be done in a series of ways. So in South Carolina, and I'm speaking for South Carolina specifically, different states will have different specific requirements. But in South Carolina, it is each 5 years unless you have national board. And so that does, it changes things slightly. If you don't have your master's, some of those hours of recertification, it's 120 every 5 years. So if you don't have your master's, some of the recertification that you need to do does need to be in the form of a graduate course, which is 60 of your hours. But then your school districts will provide professional development. That's part of my job that help you accrue some of those hours as well for that continuing education piece. But you can also go to conferences. So there's a lot of ways to attain that. You may have heard of Read to Succeed. So that was a class that a lot of us had to take. Actually, I took it with my mom last summer when I was on maternity leave with Walt. So it was an exciting time as we were all learning through that process together. And so that was an example of, as part of that that legislation, that did count as 60 of your hours towards that recertification. All right, so in terms of that it's going to kind of depend, Angela, on the route that you wanted to take. So if you were looking at, so there's a couple options. So you could do what's called the PACE program. So there are some alternative pathways that you can go into education with that. So some individuals will seek to pursue that PACE option, while you'll have others, depending on the type of content you want. It could be that you're looking at going back through an alternative pathway and getting a totally different certification area that you wanted to. And so I guess an example with that, like if you were you enjoy teaching math, absolutely. So one of the options, and so I can actually give a perfect example. Two of the student teachers that I worked with, both had been practicing accountants. And so they came back into the 5th year program. And I think this kind of speaks to the question we had earlier also about environmental studies, where they were coming in. And so they began that 5th year program. At times, depending on the coursework that you've had through undergrad, you might have to add in a few additional classes, but you can go into that 5th year program if you were interested in teaching secondary math, for example. And so you would go through an internship for the year where you're taking some classes, and then you would have placements where you're working with teachers. So we do A and B placements at the University of South Carolina. So A would, and I'm just going to speak, if you were doing like fall to spring, in the fall you would do 2 6-week, this year it's 5 weeks, just based on how everything's going, but generally it's 2 6-week placements in the fall, and then you do a full semester placement in the spring, so that you get both that in-class experience, but then you also get the practice of being in the classroom as well. So we would kind of say that practitioner piece of being in the classroom, but then also we have methods classes that teach you, and I actually get to do one of the methods classes for our elementary. I do elementary math methods. And so what that is we take concepts that like we know about math, and then we teach you how to teach that same thing, because it's kind of like teaching what a number is. Like those are kind of some abstract ideas. And so there are method classes for the different ones. But so given like the background in finance, and again, I'm thinking about 2 student teachers that I've had who had been accountants prior and were interested in changing that pathway. They looked into the master's program for what we would consider that 5th year program, so that they could pick up the master's in teaching. And so there's a master's in teaching, and then there's the MAT. And so they're different in the number of hours, but that's probably the route that you would be interested in. Absolutely. So not being in the classroom every day, I do try to spend a good portion of my week going into buildings to be able to support teachers. And so sometimes that means co-teaching and helping out with that, like I'm helping write lesson plans, looking at assessments. A big part of what I was actually doing today was us looking at, when we are administering assessments, how do we analyze that data to then be able to refine our practice, and identify like where are students struggling and where and need some additional support, and where are students really, really thriving, and how can I continue along to support them in that way. And then also I get to work with federal, you're welcome, Angela, I get to work with federal programs. So for our ESOL program, I support our ESOL teachers, both with their content. We've actually, our district just did like a big purchase for curriculum. So kind of coordinating that, but then also making sure that I'm up to date with the federal and state guidelines to make sure that what we're doing in the classroom and as a district complies with legislation and guidelines that are in place. And so also with that comes that I manage our funds. So federal grants do come with each of those. And so some of that is going to be within district if we're having an after school program or summer school, and I'm helping serve with that and getting teachers who are going to work along with that program as well. But then also from a professional development standpoint, are we going to be writing curriculum? Are we writing new assessments? Have we recently had a textbook adoption and we need to update some things? And so working with teachers to write that curriculum so that we have it available. We're going to be able to be provided with information through the state and our textbooks, but then also being able to really engage our teachers. And so with that, I think that this kind of comes back in with the professional development conversation, but then also continuing education. We know that we're learning more and more about how individuals learn, and we're refining our practices. So being able to come together and talk about what we're able to provide and how we can continue to improve both our instruction, but then also the material that we are providing to students. So we have that option, or sorry, that is one piece of it as well. And then also bringing in individuals who are experts around the country to talk with our teachers. And then there's professional organizations as well. I'm currently serving as the president for the South Carolina the South Carolina Leaders of Mathematics Education. And so with that, on a monthly basis, the math leaders in the state come together to talk about how we can best support our districts, and again, kind of working with both the State Department of Education and then vendors as well as what's available. And so in the same way that I'm a part of that organization for math, we also have organizations in the state for social studies, science, ELA, and the like. There's an organization for middle school educators, so specific to where you are, and it's not just one that you can be a part of, but there's that greater professional community that you get to be a part of throughout the state. So one of the greatest ways that I think you can be creative with those lessons is sharing ideas with one another. I showed the picture that had Alex in it earlier, and so we would get together before school in the morning sometimes and talk about ideas. While we both taught math, we had some different classes within our schedules, but we were still able to talk about ideas that we had. And I think it's like reading, it's studying, it's learning, going to conferences, and just like kind of training yourself to look at things in a different way. For example, I was eating an orange and I looked at it and I was like, And as I'm like peeling off, well, I guess it was a cutie, and I'm like peeling it off and I'm thinking, this is a great way to teach about the surface area of a sphere, because the cover, like the rind of this orange, the peel, of this orange is covering it in the same way like surface area would work for a sphere. And so as I peel it off, I'm like, I see a lesson here. And so the next day, our bell work problem was, orange, you glad you're in my math class, because we were already talking about three-dimensional figures. And so I think it's being able to think outside the box, and then also not being afraid to take some risks. So I can give an example of it was metric week, the week of October 10th, and so we were doing the metric Olympics, and y'all, I fell flat on my face. That first lesson, it was not going well at all. And I had an intern from USC with me, and I could see in her face, she's looking at me like, how did I get partnered with her? This is not going well. And so, but I'm taking mental notes along the way, because it was something I thought could be so, so powerful. I just had to make sure I did it right. And so when the next class is coming in, she's like, so what are we going to do now? And I was like, we're doing it again. And now I see even greater panic. She's like, it was bad, and she doesn't even know it's bad. But trust me, I knew it was bad. But there were all these mental tweaks that I had made along the way. So when it came time to do it with our second class, it was great. And so it's kind of like always refining and getting ideas, like Barbie bungee, and that it doesn't just have to be Barbie. Let's see what it looks like when Iron Man chooses to, and so that's a great to do his bungee jump. And that's a great way to start talking about scatter plots and like linear regression. So looking at ideas like that, being like reading, going to the teacher channel. That's how I got the idea for the edible car contest, and just things like that. Like recognizing that we don't have all the answers, and we're not going to have every single idea, but there's a lot of great ideas out there. I do think it's important that like we vet them and we talk about them, because we want to make sure what we're teaching the students is right. But there's a whole lot of fun ways, going on a walk and seeing all the math that's around you. And I know I'm speaking a little more heavily to the math side of things, because that's what I've taught over the last decade. But just thinking outside the box, being willing to learn more, collaborating with others, and just soaking up every resource you possibly can. So working with extracurricular programs is really, it's a way to meet your students in a totally different way. You develop a really cool relationship with them. So we're often encouraged while we're going through our educator preparation programs, like go see concerts, go to student performances, go to football games, like get to know your students outside of the classroom as well. Because while you are developing that community within, there's a totally different side that you get to see somebody when you're not in the classroom with him or her. So I'll say it does take a lot of planning and scheduling at times, but it's a really neat additional like layer to that relationship that you get to develop with your students, but then with your families as well. So if it's something that you're interested in, if you're in the classroom or you're wanting to go into teaching and you like to run or you like basketball or you like yearbook, like there's a lot. I like math, so we were working with the math team. So there's a lot of great opportunities to be able to get involved with those. And so it's really talking to your administrator, and it could be that the team already or the club already exists, or maybe you're starting a new one, like Legos. Like some schools are starting to develop Lego and robotics clubs. So some of it is, what's your passion outside of your content that you can start building additional relationships and kind of like growing that desire in others. And I'll tell y'all, like I love to run, but many of the girls on our team were far better runners than I was. Like I'd studied it. I knew like mechanics and I knew how to help them get better. But in a race, certainly a sprint, they were going to beat me. But it's a cool way to get to know them at a different level, and to be able to like really build that relationship and let them see like I am fully committed to helping us both become the best versions of ourselves. All right, so I'm looking at challenges I faced in my teaching career. So I'm trying to think through this. I see one with the virtual instruction. So I'm going to kind of talk about that, Angela, but I'm going to think about like some other things as well that might lean into that. But so virtual instruction has absolutely been one where it's needing to think creatively. Like we know we have the technology to make this happen. It's just what's the best way to do it and to make sure that we're able to engage all of our families. So I think that it's actually been easier than we expected from the fact that the technology was there. And so we spent a lot of time, I can speak for my district, we spent a lot of time this summer, and I know the same is true for others as well, doing a lot of professional development specifically on being able to teach and instruct virtually. So how do we build engagement? If I'm showing a slide, how do I make sure that I keep my words limited, because nobody wants to look at a screen that's just like totally filled. I've got to think about fatigue that comes with that virtual piece. So there's a lot that goes into what we call blended learning, and that's not just the in-person and the virtual, but when we are together as a group synchronously in a virtual space, but then also asynchronously. Now, maybe you're doing some on your own, and so individuals creating playlists. So maybe there's a video and there's an article, and now there's time for us to come together. And so my district does not personally use Zoom, but some do. And different districts are using different platforms, but then within that breakout session for you to have that small group discussion. So it's been really neat to see how we can actually still create like station rotations, but do it virtually. And I'd say it's actually, and this is just my experience, but we're able to do some of those really cool ideas that more historically have lent themselves to elementary school, being able to rotate through different activities. I think we're starting to see at middle and high school more and more, because we're seeing how does it structure within that content area to be able to do it. So I think that it's taken a lot of forethought to be ready for that. And I don't think anyone, I guess I'll step back on that. I'm sure some people could disagree with me, but it's taken a lot of forethought to get into this, and maybe been a little bit scary and overwhelming at times, but it's been really cool to see when we look at all the resources that are available, we're able to do. And so I can give you one example today. I was talking with a teacher, and so I do work with our English language learners. And so one of the big things has been making sure that our Spanish speaking families have all the same information. And so making sure that we have everything translated, that we've had teachers, or excuse me, we've had interpreters. And I credit Dr. Fitton from UofSC with helping work with some of our students in the language lab to actually have some on-site interpreters for our students who are getting dropped off on the first day in case parents had questions, especially with that hybrid. Because if we have a family that shows up on Tuesday, but they're not supposed to come until Thursday, we've got to be able to explain that to our families. So that's been a big piece. And then making sure that we have that accessibility there. So legally, interesting fact, legally you can't send out formal documents through Google Translate. They do need to have been seen and vetted by a translator. But if I was talking in the classroom, I could use Google Translate to quickly provide an extra document so that my students have that accessibility piece. If I see it in English, I can also create, I'm personally going to want to set it as a Google Doc so I can have that Spanish version as well. That said, we do have some districts in the state that don't use the Google Suite. And so today, and so the thing this is so great, if you have an iPad, and so I guess I said this, I'm not sure, maybe I could be misspeaking about if you can use this on an iPad if you are not a Google district. But for those of you who have an iPhone or an iPad of your own, something really cool that I was taught today is the Google Translate app. So I downloaded the app on my phone and I hold it up to something in front of me that's written, I'm going to say in English to Spanish translation, something that's written in English. And I hold the camera up just like it's a QR reader, and immediately my screen on the camera will show that text in Spanish. And so some of that, as we start thinking about how we're making it easier and more accessible, I think we're learning so much to improve education on the whole that this has really driven us to be innovative, and I think it's going to vastly improve education on the whole. All right, and then so kind of looping back to challenges. I think it's one of the big things is being willing to recognize that we're gonna need assistance sometimes. Like, we do come out, we're professionals, we're knowledgeable of our content and ready to teach and instruct. But there's so many there's so much that goes in to being a teacher, being able to have that time management piece. Like earlier, it was mentioned about lesson plans, writing those, having a deep understanding of the standards, having time to read these articles and potentially vet different resources. So I think one of the challenges that I personally faced was being willing to reach out to others and say, hey, I don't know a lot about this. Can you help me out? So like today, when a teacher tells me, like, did you know about Google Translate app? I was like, no, teach me about it. And so really getting to be comfortable in that place of that I want to be the learner. And I'll tell you also, just something that is kind of a gut check and is going to happen. I don't know of a teacher that this hasn't happened to, but when you're writing on the board and you make a math mistake and it's a very, very obvious one, or you misspell a word and your class is like, hello, do you know you just did that? So like being able to say, yes, I am going to make mistakes, wanting to grow from them, wanting to correct them, but being able to model that too, because you are a role model every day for those students in how you treat others, in how you handle mistakes and grow from them. Today I saw on a teacher's board, and I'm probably not going to remember it exactly how it was written, but the beauty of it was in this classroom, like mistakes are, I'm going to mess it up. But anyway, one of them was expected, and then in huge letters, it said respected, and then it said corrected. There's a video, I mentioned the teacher channel earlier, there's a video, it's my favorite. No, I adore this video because it's a teacher who specifically looks for incorrect answers in her classroom so that she can talk about all the right that was still there in there. And so one of the challenges is when we have students who are so saddened with themselves when they might not get an answer right, and so being able to build them back up, you'll hear people talking about SEL, social and emotional learning. So being able to balance those social and emotional needs of our students while we're also providing that academic support. And so being able to say, maybe this answer wasn't correct, but here's everything you did right beforehand, and really being able to celebrate that. So I think it's recognizing just how vast our roles are as teachers, and being like being willing to reach out and say, this is where I need that additional support.
All right, any last questions for Jennifer before we wrap up tonight? We got through so many great ones. So thank you all so much for being here and participating in tonight's event. I hope you learned a lot like I did. And keep an eye on our events page, uofscalumni.org/events for more events like this one coming up soon. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for sharing your time with us today and all of your insight in the world of teaching. It was really, really great.
Thank you so much. Y'all have a great
evening.